Hello, this is Mark. The MacBook Air is a computer, and the iPad is something called, lots of people call the iPad mobile internet device, but please allow me to call the iPad versatile e-contents device. Okay? Some might say things like, well, they're uncomparable, but please let me give you my answer. They are comparable. You know what? There are a large number of people in the world. They have no clues about the difference between the iPad and the MacBook Air's 11-inch. Somebody calls the iPad tablet's computer, which is not. Okay, let me go deeper into each device configurations. Okay. Um, Firstly, the MacBook Air 11-inch, the least expensive one, costs $999 US. Okay, it has 40% better graphics density for the pixels. The pixels that we found on the screen, okay, is 40% better than the iPad. And secondly, the MacBook Air allows you to increase the RAMs up to 4 gigabytes of RAM, DDR3 RAMs. That's the reason why we can do multitasking on our computers, but we cannot do multitasking on the iPad. Thirdly, the MacBook Air has the NVIDIA GeForce graphic card, very discrete graphic cards, so it allows to play very expensive and something called graphic intensive games, 3D games like Resident Evil 5 or whatever on our MacBook Air. Okay, and the MacBook Air has a number of ports and components that cannot be found on the iPad. Whether it's the USB ports, we got 2 USB ports, 1 mini display, okay, better camera, we have cameras, better speakers and microphones and everything. Of course, it's a computer. So in terms of the overall performance, the MacBook Air is much faster than the iPad and it's way better. But it doesn't mean the MacBook Air is better than the iPad. Okay, it's depending on how do you plan on using your computer for. Okay, the only thing that you may have to buy in terms of comparisons ways, you have paid $999 for the MacBook Air. Okay, you have to be a bit more generous to pay for this device. Okay, it's called 3G Air card. Okay, because the MacBook Air itself, it doesn't have the micro SIM slot. So you need an external device to carry that SIM card, then you can hook up to 3G network. These types of SIM cards, air card like USB air card like this, is quite cheap. I spent $40 for this one. The brand called like Huawei or something. I bought it in Asia Pacific. Not so expensive though. Oh, okay. So the Air is 1,000, right? Plus the air card, probably 30, $40. Okay, let's say $1,050. Okay, for the MacBook Air. Okay, so let's have a close look to the iPad. So what would be the benefit from getting the iPad? The iPad is not a computer. Okay, I've been trying for almost 2 months to find the right terminology of the iPad. Most people in the world call the iPad a mobile internet device. But I would call it myself, I would call it a versatile e-contents device. Okay, whether internet or games or applications or ebooks or whatever and so on. But it's not a computer. There is a huge gap between Mac OS X or the iOS for iPhone or iPad is not a computer. Okay. Firstly, you might love the iPad because it's way lighter than the MacBook Air 11-inch. Okay, but not much, slightly, around 2.0 kilograms. So slightly lighter. Okay, but that's a good point. And secondly, the battery of the iPad lasts longer than the MacBook Air because the iPad is not a computer. The battery for the MacBook Air 11-inch lasts up to only 5 hours on a single charge, but the battery for the iPad lasts up to 10 hours on a single charge because it's not a computer. Okay? And thirdly, the interface of the iPad is much simpler to learn. Like for instance, if I want to buy an IT type present for someone I love, like my grandmother or my father, okay, and like for instance, my father, like he's quite old, right, and he doesn't know how to use a Mac. If I buy him a Mac, I might have to buy him a books, okay, a very huge book like Snow Leopard stuff or whatever, very thick book like I got a textbook is about leopard here. It's very okay. It's really thick. Okay. But if I buy my father a present like an iPad, he doesn't have to know much about computer because iPads provide much simpler interface to learn, to hook up to the internet, to manipulate contacts or email address, to play around with any application, whether free or we have to purchase. Okay. And the things that I like the most about the iPad is I think it's a good gaming device. You know what? Some games doesn't require any, discrete or high-end graphic card or expensive graphic card like NVIDIA. Okay? So we don't have to go to the maximum levels that we can find in this era. But the story, the way the game plays is truly fun. So we like the game. That's the reason why people tend to play Facebook games. The Facebook game doesn't require NVIDIA graphic cards. That's the point. So I think it's a good gaming device and it's a good present for kids also. Okay, and the iPad takes much less time to boot itself up compared to the MacBook Air because the OS of the iPad is much smaller than the Air, even though both of them have exactly the same solid-state drive. Okay, for the price of $829 for the top-of-the-line 3G iPad, you might think, okay, well, compared to the $1,050 for the MacBook Air, the iPad might be cheaper. Okay, but I got something to tell you because I work at the Apple store full time and I can say 24 hours. It's not over yet to pay only $829. You know what? When you buy an iPad, you need a case for it. Sometimes you buy this case, you don't like the case, you change the case. After a case, you need the protective films for the screen, right? Because some cases might come with films inside the package, but those tend to be quite lousy for some reason from my true experience. Because I knew how to put on these films on the Mac or any iPad or iPhone. So you need a films, you need a protective films, you need a case for the iPad, you need an external, probably lots of people ask for external keyboard, whether the Bluetooth one or the keyboard with a docking station. So if we gather these items together, they might cost you more than $300. So the summarize might be the iPad is more expensive than the MacBook Air. Okay, and the iPad doesn't support multitasking because it's not a computer, so you can do only one task at a time. So that's the bottom line. It doesn't have a camera, it doesn't have USB port, but but it's a much simpler device in order to get to the information era, in order to surf the web, check email, read ebooks, playing games, get some nice application like cooking apps or travel apps, because there are 250,000 applications available in the world. Okay, so I'm not your enemy, I'm your messenger, and I'm telling you the truth. And this time the choice is yours, whether to go for the iPad or the MacBook Air. You got what I mean? Like for instance, if you just purchase the iPad, and I would say the Air is better, you might hate my guts. But if you're fair enough to think, well, that's fine because, well, MacBook Air is a computer. iPad is something else. I can give away the iPad to someone I love, or I can use the iPad as my ebook reader or something. Okay. And before I leave these clips, I would suggest to you one thing. Before you buy something, you have to figure it out. Do I really have to buy that, or just because the social proof? Because I've been doing some research for the last couple of weeks that I've been traveling a lot to some other countries and a number of shopping malls, any places that teenagers or people gatherings around. You know what? I can give you one funny story that I've been seeing people holding the iPhone 4 or 3 in their hands, and then they've been playing around with something. So I thought they might playing around with any certain application, but for all I know, when I asked them, they were doing just playing around with the interface and the contact list. And I've been trying to find the person who really enjoyed playing iPad games, but I couldn't find one for some reason. When I saw someone playing a game, um, those particularly ones always were PSP or Nintendo DS. Okay, so before you buy something, please kind of figure it out. Do I really need to get the most out of this device? Or I wanted just to buy it to just carry it around and find the nice cases for it, and then wait for probably less than a year when they release a new one and resell it. And I buy a new one and lose money, but well, I felt so good because I had it. Okay, that's the bottom line. So I think you got some idea from my clips today what would be the difference between the MacBook Air, which is a computer, 11-inch, $999, and the iPad 829 for the 3G models. Okay, but I think eventually the iPad costs you more. Trust me, you trust me, man, because I know. Thanks for watching.